Hello, everyone. Welcome back to this episode of Breakthrough Innovation. Joining us today is Arnaud Lucas, a seasoned technology executive who's built and led high growth, innovation first organizations across industries like e commerce, travel, and SaaS. Arnaud is a hands on CTO and VP of engineering with a track record of doubling revenue through AI, Gen AI, mobile innovation, and cloud transformation, while also winning a Webby Award along the way. He's restructured engineering teams for scale, pioneered mobile strategies that have led to two times growth, and reimagined hiring processes to improve both diversity and delivery, both important things to innovation. Arnaud is passionate about connecting business vision to technical execution, and he brings a unique approach to leadership, often inspired by baking, brewing, and gardening. No kidding. Arnaud, welcome. It's really exciting to have you on the show, and I can't wait to dive in.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Awesome. So maybe tell us a little bit about kind of how you got to your role, where you come from.
That sounds good. As you can hear from my accent, I'm French originally, but I'm in the US for 27 years now, so there are things that I don't lose. I guess my accent is one of them. But I spent actually my first 8 years in the US. I came to the US after school, after my military service, effectively. And in the US, I first started doing startups. In different companies in Texas, of all places. So it's funny because all my startups in Houston, Texas, had nothing to do with oil or the oil business. And yet I was there. So very interesting times. But then we moved to the Boston area, so in Massachusetts. And yeah, we've been here now since 2006 or so. And Boston area, I've done different company sizes, right? I worked first for Iron Mountain as an architect, very much on the tech track. Then I moved to TripAdvisor, stayed there for a long time, but that's where I went to leadership. Then went to Wayfair, which is a Boston-based company as well, much bigger, and then still in leadership track. Then decided would it be nice to do a startup again? And so I joined a small Boston-based startup called Wonder as a CTO for a few years. And then now I'm at Cambridge Mobile Telematics, which is a very interesting company because it's very much a B2B company. It's very mission driven, which is great for me. Also, it's kind of this, I call it middle size, right? It's 500 employees, so it's not too big, not too small, just right
Yeah,
kind of size for me.
in the Goldilocks zone of companies.
Exactly. So that's it for me.
That's awesome. I'm a big fan of those medium, maybe slightly smaller, large companies because I feel like when you turn the rudder, you can actually feel the ship turn versus like the really large companies, when you turn the rudder, the ship takes a little while to turn. So I wish you the best of luck in your new role. So congratulations on that first.
Yes, no, thank you so much. I'm very excited. It has been great.
So I know when we were connecting earlier, you mentioned that you've been doing some writing, and the way you talked about it just kind of tickled me a little bit. So I wanted to dig in a little because you mentioned that you've learned some lessons from baking and brewing that you apply to leadership. And I'm curious, maybe if you could expand on that and let us know kind of what the connection is and what your takeaways are.
Yeah, I mean, so for me, so there are two aspects that are actually fairly different. For me, baking, I associate that with ownership. I'll tell you why. For me, that's part of that. So I'm a big proponent of extreme ownership, which is not that extreme, to be perfectly honest. It's more about the fact that you do everything you can do to influence the success, effectively, of your domain, right, of what you own. So for me, I like to have making sure that teams own what they own and they can own that fully in different shape or form. So that means from how do we organize for that ownership, but also how do we make sure that we have the right culture of ownership and then do everything we can within the domain for that domain to be successful. And so that's where baking comes on, right? So because for me with baking, there is an outcome you want to have, which is to actually have a cake or a pie or something like that, right? And I do believe that, that baking, on one side, you have a lot of ingredients, things that you need to use effectively. And then you have kind of that expertise on how you bring these ingredients together, the how, the process, the who is doing what. My wife is, for example, slicing the apples to put in the apple tart. I'm doing the dough or something like that, or the compote or whatever it is. And so you have multiple people potentially involved in making that one thing. And then the way that you do it is very important, right? Because baking is almost scientific in nature, which is maybe that's why I like it, is because if you don't follow the recipe, most likely this is going to go very wrong. Right? It's not like, I can say, making a meal or a dish where sometimes there is room for error, like, not exact. With baking, if you don't quite have the right proportion, if you don't follow the steps in the right order, it's, their opportunity for recoveries are slim. And I think that's what, for me, it's important there, because in terms of ownership, the same thing applies, right? So, and in terms of your domain ownership, yes, you have all your ingredients. You have your tech and your tools and all these things, right? These are all the things that are on. You have people, part of your team, hopefully, that are kind of baking, that are putting all
Right.
these things together, but they need to know how to do that, right? And and where to get to that outcome effectively that you want, like that vision that you have for your domain, is that what are the strategies and what are the different steps in each of the strategy to get where you want to be? And for me, that's exactly like baking, effectively.
Mm.
It's a recipe. It's actually
Yeah.
multiple recipe that you do in parallel, because usually a domain is not one aspect, or there's different aspects that are influenced by different strategies. But ultimate, so it's like you're baking multiple cakes at the same time, and to make like a
Right.
mini pièce montée, which is the multiple cakes line up one on top of the other. But, so it's more complicated than baking a cake for sure. But for me, the same principle apply
Oh, I
effectively.
love that. And I like the way you apply it to extreme ownership. I wonder when you're working with teams, so that concept of extreme ownership, I think gives some people, some teams anxiety. And I have a lot of ideas of why that might be. But I'm curious for you, when you're in these organizations, whether a startup or large, how do you help teams feel? I don't want to say comfortable because that's the wrong word. How do you help teams feel capable? Maybe that's the right word of accepting that ownership, of taking that ownership.
For me, it's a multiple step process, right? It's like you're the stage of grief,
Yeah.
because I think one is that your a team needs to learn about their domain. That's step number one. And I talk a lot about visibility. I always say visibility is step one. But what I mean by that is that if you don't know something, it's going to be very difficult to improve it. And learning about that domain takes, you can do that in multiple ways, or depending on the team, depending on how to, it could be looking at code, could be, being an actual consumer of that. It could be, reading documentation, talking to people that know different aspects of it, right? There are different ways. But first, you have to be comfortable with your domain, right? In what way you own. The second part is, to build a vision for that. So you know enough now that you can say, or if I were to start from scratch, like that thing didn't exist whatsoever, what if I had to rebuild it from the get-go? What will it look like? So knowing what you know now, knowing that where we're going as a business, this is how it should be done. And it's not, most likely. Like, that's fine. But you kind of, you have that 2 to 3 year vision of where you want it to be. And you document that of the what, but also document the why. That's very important, because don't forget that vision is not just for yourself as a team. That vision is the thing that, when people ask you why you are doing something, say because of this. And that's one of the first document you can provide to people. Say, this is why I'm doing this, right? And then people can disagree or not agree, but at least it's there. They can take it, and so it's one the first artifact that helps you influence others effectively, including people on your team. And once you have that, then you need to start defining strategies. Like, what are the different swim lanes that you're going to work on to make that happen? Once you have that, then you need to define milestones. Is that okay? This quarter I'm doing this other quarter I'm doing that. This quarter is not a good quarter because we have other things that actually makes money that we need to fix, or whatever it is, right? Be able to have strong milestones. And then once you have that, then that's where you can start producing tickets and getting not just you potentially doing some work, but also getting the teams to do some work, the other teams to do some work, right? To
Right.
do all these things. And so For me, it's a multi-stage process because extreme ownership means that obviously you do the work that you should be doing.
Right.
That's step one. But more importantly, and I think the more complicated part for a lot of people, is how do you influence others to make them do what you want them to do, to
Right.
help with your domain, right? Because domains are not in a vacuum, right? They are
Right. Oh yeah.
adjacent to each other. So you want to influence not just your own thing, you can put like border control on your domain or all these things to make sure that there is no intrusion. Sure, do what you have to do, but also most likely you have to influence the other domains so that you can actually do what you need to do within your domain. And I think and that ability to influence without authority usually,
Right.
you know, is not a one thing. It's not just, oh, I talk to that person and say, you need to do this for me, and they're going to automatically do it. That's not how it works. It's about, there's something you're trying to do that seems reasonable. You get people aligned on that. And then as you start making movement, you'll say, hey, can you help me with that? And it fits into that overall picture that you already agreed on. I think that's for me, that's a lot of that, right? And there are a lot of multiple ways to do that. For example, maybe instead of imposing a vision right away, I don't think that's a good idea. You start by asking input from people,
Right.
from the stakeholders about,
Make sure they
so
feel like they have a part in it.
exactly, what do you think? What we should be doing? And then hopefully your vision incorporates that. Maybe it doesn't, but either way, they know they have been heard. Right? That doesn't come out of nowhere. So for me, that's what it means to have extreme ownership. That yeah, you want to be very active. You want to say, "Oh, these things happened. What do I do? Who can I influence? What?" But there is a very proactive aspect of that about effectively keep on telling others about your needs, the needs of your domain, and what you expect from it.
So if I'm hearing you right, it's about making sure you have the right expertise on the team, ensuring that the vision or the direction, the purpose is clear. And then I may be putting words in your mouth here, so correct me. But the definition of success is collaborative, where people can come in and contribute their ideas and be heard about what success actually looks like. And then maybe the last thing as a leader is then maybe not completely, but to some extent, letting go and letting the team take over.
I mean, ultimately, the team has to be the one taking ownership, but you have to lead by example.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which for me, that's something that is not a leader thing. Oh, the leader needs to have ownership. No, no, everybody on the team needs to have ownership, right? In their own way, in their own ability to do that. And I think that, that if not everybody on the team has ownership, then a leader cannot take ownership
Right.
effectively.
Well, and I'm a big fan of the metaphor for leadership as a gardener.
Yes,
And I think you mentioned this earlier, or I may be
yes,
imagining it. You may be familiar with General Stanley McChrystal. I can't remember the name of
yes.
his book right now, but he talked about this spectrum of leadership. With on one side, it's the chess master, the guy controlling all the pieces and all the moves, and on the other side, it's the gardener. And I always, in these conversations, I start thinking about the gardener. So maybe this is a good place to pivot and talk to you, ask you when you think about gardening, like what have you learned from that in terms of leadership?
Yeah, so actually, something I wrote an article about that because for me, love to garden. I do love to garden, but I think it's a old tradition. Like just say, my grandfather was a farmer, my father was a gardener. I'm a gardener. I'm from the countryside. It feels like I had no choice but to garden.
Yeah.
But so to your point, so I think many articles actually discuss leading like a gardener as a way to empower people. So exactly what you mentioned, which is that you give people the right context. You're transparent with them. You give me everything they need to do. You give them the right incentive, and then you let them be and do their thing. Which I think in the tech industry, I think is critical because you pay people very well, and therefore you pay them to think,
Right.
not just to do things, random things on the keyboard, right? So having that notion of empowering people to do their best is not just the right thing to do, it is the only way that a tech company can make this free market. But that's one part, right? It's empowering people, nurture them in different ways, giving the right incentives, like all these things, trusting, interesting motivation. But
Yeah.
for me, it's more
Give
than
them
that.
the things they need to grow.
Yes, but yeah, it's like a plant, effectively. But it's more than that, in my opinion, because for me, when you look at my garden, for me, I see my garden as a complex organism. Well, it's not just one plant that you're trying to grow. It's a complex organism like a company. And what that means is that w- each plant, like each employee has unique needs and contributes in their own way to make the garden productive as well, right? So if you have a bad, you know that, right? For example, you have a plant that's getting sick, that has a disease. You know that if you don't treat it right away, everybody else will have that disease, right? All the other plants will have that disease, and then you lose a full crop of
Right.
something. The tomato plants are famous for that. So you don't want that, right? So now you see that the health of one plant has an impact of the health of your organization overall, potentially, which makes it even important to also choose the right plants in the first place, right? You're making sure that you have the right
Absolutely.
employees, the organization, but more importantly, that from an organization standpoint, you understand as well what the outcome of your garden should be. What do you want to grow in your garden? What do you want? Vegetable, fruits,
Right.
herbs. What's important to you? How should they be disposed one versus the other? Right, yeah, for example, in order to grow tomato plants, you usually put basil because basil helps the tomato crunch grow, and the tomato provides shade for the basil plants, which don't like to direct sun.
Right.
So there are these companion plants that go together.
I like that.
So you need
That's
to
a
have
really good
one with
analogy.
the other, right? So otherwise they won't be able to do everything they need to do in the organization to be successful. And same thing, some plants need a lot of sun, some plants don't like sun. So how you're going to place them in the garden in the sunny part of the garden versus the shady part of the garden. For example, strawberry plants don't like that much sun, actually. They tend to burn if you put too much sun on them, but tomato plants like sun. So it's like, okay, I'm going to put my tomatoes on the left side, my strawberries on the right side, and I'm going to have these companion plants, and I'm putting my herbs here, and all these things. So now you're talking about business units and how you organize
Right.
across business units and what kind of business unit you have. And then within that, okay, well, you have teams, and those teams need to have a certain level of expertise in each team to be successful, and so on.
Oh, I love that. And I could totally dig into the idea of systems theory, organizational design, and culture all day. Unfortunately, we do have to start wrapping up. So I'm curious, given your perspective, and I love every moment of this, what do you feel like the insight leaders need today? Like, what is the message that new leaders need to hear to take away from this?
Well, I mean, new leaders, at least I'm talking from my experience. So I came from a tech aspect. So I was an engineer. I still consider myself an engineer, but I came from a individual contributor, like somebody hands-on keyboard kind of person, and now I'm managing effectively, right? So, and I think for me, that transition, for me, I learned a lot from that. And for me, what I learned is that you have to give people the room to succeed effectively, and you have to nurture them. And when you come from a strong technical background, right, it's very easy for you to, how can I say that, to say, you know what, they are going to be too slow, I'm going to do it myself. But that's the wrong answer, is that you actually want to determine who should be doing what for the long-term success of the company, and then making sure that you are exposing them early, often, to that, so that at some point they're able to actually do that, right? And it's not by you doing the work, for example, that it's going to work. Same thing is not giving people answers either, right? I already mentioned you pay them to think, but ultimately, if you cannot get them to think, then you are not utilizing them long term in the best way possible, right? So if you keep on giving them the answer, but this is what you should be doing, which is why a lot of leaders tend to go with question first. On their inside, they say, something is fishy here. I don't like that thing. But it's not like they don't just say, I don't like that. They say, so what do you think about that thing? What about this? What about that?
The
And
Socratic approach.
it's not more to get the other person to say, oh, yeah, I think I'm missing something. Okay, let's and go on it a bit and go from there.
I love it. I love it. Arnaud, this has been fantastic. What is the best way for someone to connect with you if they need some support on leadership, if they want to connect and collaborate?
By far, I think the best medium is still LinkedIn for me. Not sure why at this point, but it is what it is. So LinkedIn and my handle is Lucas Arb. So last name and first three letter of my first name together. That's so, but obviously you can look out for my name.
Perfect. I love it. Thank you so much for this conversation. Honestly, I love the correlation between baking and gardening and leadership. I think it works really well. It helps people understand a little bit better what effective leadership looks like. I also want to thank everyone else who's been listening all the way to the end. We'd love it if you leave a rating or a review, but maybe even more importantly, if you know someone who would benefit from Arnaud's message here, share the wealth, introduce them to Arnaud, and help everyone grow as leaders. That said, go back through the episode, find some takeaways that work for you, change something, grow a little bit, and let us know how it goes. That said, though, we'll see you all next time on Breakthrough Innovation. Thanks.
Thank you.